nostalgic anniversaries, parallel tests in JUnit 5, assorted requiems, or is that requia, and the usual collection of silly tweets and toots. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. The subtitle this week of the newsletter is, Before I Die, I'm going to eat a whole bag of popcorn. That ought to make the cremation more entertaining. I probably should have qualified that with unpopped popcorn, because if I ate a whole bag of popcorn, that's not going to... I know, I'm giving this way too much focus than it deserves. Let's move on. Welcome, fellow jarheads, to Tales from the Jar Side, the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of May 26th through June 2nd, 2024. It's actually Wednesday, June 5th, so I have a couple extra days here, but I've been debating the future of the newsletter, and I'll probably talk to you about that later anyway. This week, I taught a deep dive into spring training course as a no-fluff, just-up virtual workshop. Here's the normal disclaimers or information messages regular readers of and listeners to, and of course, video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or listener or viewer. If you wish to become a jarhead, please subscribe using the button in the newsletter or, of course, to the YouTube channel. Let's talk about some anniversaries and reunions. It's been kind of a nostalgic week for me. I mentioned I'm feeling mildly nostalgic this week. That's true, and part of it I blamed on fighting a bit of a cold. The cold was a lot worse last week. I'm getting over it now. There's still a certain huskiness or closed quality to my voice. I'm sorry about that on the video, but figured I don't want to wait any longer to get something out. I don't know why that would contribute to nostalgia, but oh well, I'll go with it. But my energy level's been off, and I've spent a lot of time trying to catch up on sleep and things like that. Now, another source of the nostalgia is that I've had a couple of reunion anniversaries come up. Last weekend was my 40-year anniversary from my graduation at MIT. I was a member of the class of 1984. I had 2 bachelor's degrees, one in mechanical engineering and one in math, and they both were concurrent. Now, I don't necessarily think of that as anything special. I know it sounds silly, but part of the reason I went for the 2 degrees is because I figured it would make my grade point sound better. I don't know that I would have done any better had I focused on one, or if I had not taken as many courses. I was going to put in the work I was going to put in, and it either worked out or it didn't. So it also made me feel like I was paying half of what everybody else is paying for their degree, although back then, of course, the prices were a lot less than they are now. I actually checked in U.S. dollars to see what the change was. I know this is going to shock some people, but when I went to MIT, I had the tuition my senior year, I remember, because I was the last year to get out before they cracked $10,000 a year. It was $9,800 or $9,600, something like that, for the whole year, just tuition. Then there was room and board, etc. And I checked what that would be in today's dollars, and they estimated it as about $30K, so that's triple. Of course, tuition for next year at MIT is very likely, I don't know, it's either $90K or getting closer to $100. So typical, the tuition price increases have gone up at well over double the pace of inflation for 40 years or more. It's just absurd. Anyway, a lot of people got together last weekend for the reunion activities, and I was not one of them. I wasn't even really tempted. I am interested in some of those people because MIT students tend to have pretty successful careers. There's an online book of how people have done or what their career has been and everything, and I contributed to that. But that meant that every couple of weeks I would get a list of updates from my, quote, classmates. And I say, quote, classmates, because in all the updates I got from the first day it was available until last weekend, I didn't recognize anybody's name. I didn't know anybody. And it's like, this is not making me want to go to the reunion to go see a bunch of people and reminisce with people I don't remember and maybe never even met at the time. I know I tended to spend most of my time in my living group, Desmond, Thomas C. Desmond 09. Desmond House is Newhouse 5, and I spent most of my time there. But still, I don't remember anybody from there posting anything. And there may have been others, but I missed it. So anyway, it just didn't appeal to me. Of course, the other reason I didn't go, I guess I should wait before I get into that. So I said, I'm glad I went there. It is a good place to be from. It's just not a great place to be. The environment, at least when I was there, is very high pressure and very high intensity and everything. But the pressure is mostly coming from within. It's the whole freshman year's on pass-fail. So you're not pitted against everybody else. Also, you realize pretty quickly that everybody you meet has the ability to graduate. This is not like law school where they bring in 3 people to keep 1. It's not like that. It's not a pre-med program or something like that. It's much more of a, look, you made it through the sieve. If you got here, you're good enough. You'll be fine. It's just that nobody wants to be fine. They all want to be good. I remember at my freshman picnic, some dean or other got up there and said, I have bad news for you. Look around. 50% of you are going to be in the bottom half of your class. And that was a nervous chuckle that went through the students at that time, taking a bunch of kids who never got a B in their whole lives, and otherwise they wouldn't be there at all, and tell them, yeah, you're going to be in the bottom half of your class, and it's going to be rough. And that's what you learn. You find out that Class Av at the time was maybe middle B, maybe the BC cutoff, or maybe a little higher than the BC cutoff. But if you were a standard deviation below Class Ab, that was probably a C. A standard deviation above was probably an AB borderline, and everything was relative to that. So the whole key when you were there was to figure out in each course where you fit relative to Class Ab. And in some courses, I would do really well relative to Class Ab, and some I would really struggle. Like the real intense theoretical mathematics classes, I was not strong. I would be a solid B, but I was nowhere near getting an A in that. Whereas if it was a math for engineering type class, like some linear algebra class or advanced calculus for engineers, something like that, I do really well. For an engineer, I had good math skills. For a mathematician, I was better at engineering. So it was all very strange, but you figured out your freshman year where you fit relative to Class Av and operated based on that. But there was never enough time to enjoy anything. You were always behind. You were always working hard. And it was very frustrating because you'd learn things, but nobody cared because it was like, yeah, but I got 10 more things on my list of things to do. And that's very taxing. It's very wearying. So you enjoy it, but not really. There's not a lot of joy involved. Now, the other thing I mentioned, and again, I freely admit it's a different world these days. Maybe that's all different. I don't know. I just know what it was like when I was there. The other reason I didn't want to go to the reunion is because reunions are basically huge opportunities for the school to beg for money. And I find that entire idea somewhat distasteful, not to get to the point of being offensive. You're talking about universities who have endowments literally in the billions of dollars. And why do they need any money? They will claim, of course, that the tuition doesn't come anywhere near close to covering the cost of education. And I'm like, really? Prove it. I don't believe you. I honestly just don't believe that that's what you're saying. And if it is true, then you're doing something wrong. You're just wrong about this. Where's all that money going? Because I thought it was going to the faculty at first, but now that I'm going to be a faculty, I know that's not really the case. There may be isolated cases where that's true, but in general, there's just massive bureaucracies that are getting paid a huge amount of money. And for what? I don't really know. At any rate, I have 5 academic degrees. I've got 2 bachelors from MIT, an MA and a PhD from Princeton in aerospace engineering. And then I went back to school later and got an MS in computer science from Rensselaer. And I'm rather proud to say I've never given any of them any money. Why should I? There are people who need money. I give contributions. It's like I put in the little Gollum thing. It's my birthday and I want it. I give to various charities. I used to really like RIP Medical Debt. I still like it, but now they're called Undo Medical Debt, of course. There's a shelter I contribute to. There's various trans rights activities, which Happy Pride Month, a couple of religious organizations that's family related. And I support about a dozen creators on Patreon. I'm really happy to do that. Why should I give money to multi-billion-dollar organizations who just want it? Like, I should be grateful for being there, but I paid to be there, or my parents did, but somebody paid. And it was 40 years ago. Yeah, I'm still glad I went. It did matter. It still opens doors for me. I have to admit, I'm glad that I did it. But I did it a long time ago and I finished. I'm done. I'll move on. So I don't get it. But it did make me feel nostalgic. I also got an email from Princeton saying, hey, happy 35th anniversary of your PhD, which kind of threw me because I went to MIT for 4 years and then I was at Princeton for 4 years. I left in October of 88. But I remembered that even though my final thesis defense was in October and I took a job up in Connecticut, that's how I wound up in Connecticut, my degree was awarded in January. It was a half-year thing, which would put it in January of 89, which means this year is 35-year anniversary. Okay, go figure. I had no idea. But again, I'm not sending them any money. And I felt less connection to them than I do to MIT. Princeton was okay. The school cared much more about its undergrads than it cared about its grad students. Okay, it was isolating. The last 2 years I spent what they call ABD, all but dissertation. You've passed the journal exams and then you're just working on your thesis. So I didn't really spend a lot of time with a lot of other people. And most of that was with my advisor. And my advisor didn't even get tenure. So I had to rush to finish. Yeah, should I be grateful? I guess. I'm glad I went there. It did help me get my first job. All right. I don't know. So that was that one. And then, of course, just to be complete, Rensselaer, I went to Rensselaer at Hartford at night after I'd been at the research center about a decade. And I was doing that to get retrained for my computer science shift when I shifted careers from engineering to CS and learned that 10 to 15 years of coding in Fortran hadn't really taught me anything about software development. So I went back at night and got my Rensselaer degree, and right on schedule this week, they sent me another message saying, hey, contribute to the class fund or whatever. I'm like, no. I finished that in 2000. I shifted careers and I've never really looked back. So where's that leave me now? Next month, I formally joined the faculty at Trinity College in Hartford as a computer science professor of practice, or of the practice of computer science, as they say. And I only assume at some point they'll hit me up for money. I promise not to laugh, but no, I'm not going to promise that. And we'll see what happens. I don't know. At any rate, that's all background stuff, information about me in case you're curious. Let's move on. This next section was on parallel tests in JUnit 5. I did spend a little time playing with JUnit 5, and I have many examples where I just turn on a couple of parallel flags and suddenly everything's a lot faster. This is really nice. Now, I have to point out, I was going to make a video specifically about this, and I still probably will. But I realized when I was digging into it that there was more depth to it than I had implied in the newsletter. So I didn't want to just make a 5-minute quick and dirty, here's the flag you turn on and this is what happens video. I wanted to prepare some good examples and look at the edge cases and talk about what's going on under the hood and all that. And that turned out to take more time than I expected. So I'll just say that it's really a nice thing to have as an available thing. I thought it was what they call experimental, that this could all subject to change. It may change in the upcoming new versions, but as it turned out, I think it's actually been available for a while now, like since 5.3, and then they keep enabling other features of it. And we're up to 5.10. And oh, wow, I didn't know. At any rate, the bottom line is you put in a flag, you set this property JUnit Jupyter execution parallel enabled to true in the JUnit-platform.properties file, source main resources. So you enable that, and then you could set the parallel mode default to concurrent. And for most tests, that'll run them concurrently. There's also this classes default to concurrent, and that means that individual test classes will also be concurrent. And you could have all these combinations where the test classes are run sequentially, but the methods in them will be concurrent and vice versa. I just set everything to concurrent. I just want it to run as fast as possible. So this is the simple version. Also, I wrote a little extension. I worked with ChatGPT to write an extension that will measure the amount of time taken for each of these tests so I could see what the speed up looked like. And I got about a good 4 or 5 times improvement in speed in the tests I was running. So look for a video on that coming up in the future. This section I called Requia. But of course, the plural of requiems turns out to be requiems, plural of requiem. A requiem, according to Wikipedia, is a mass for the dead. I knew that much. And it is a source of a lot of classic music. A lot of really famous pieces in classical music were written as requiems, and they all have the same lyrics, of course. It's all the mass, if you will, and go through a bunch of moods, and it's really fascinating. Of the requiems I know, there's 3 that I know well enough that I pretty much have them memorized. So the first one is the one from John Rutter, Rutter's Requiem. Rutter is a rather contemporary composer, and we had a choir director who introduced him to us, and it's very harmonic. There's a lot of harmonies to it, and smooth and melodic, and I really like that one. That one was really fun. Then she tried to move us along the path to things a little bit more challenging and moved us to the Fauré Requiem, Gabriel Fauré, and that also was fantastic. And at the time, we didn't have any really wonderful baritone soloists, so they gave me a chance as the tenor soloist to do the baritone solos, and I've always been a tenor with good low notes, so that was a blast. I really enjoyed doing the Liberame and all of those things. I had a great time with that. Then they did another requiem, I think it was Brahms, and I wasn't part of that, but I've been getting training in voice training for several years, and my voice teacher connected me with Plainville Choral Society, and they were arranging a Mozart requiem. And that one has a group of 4 soloists that they hire, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and I was hired to do the tenor soloist in the Mozart requiem, which was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. But all of these things were 20 years ago, not what I used to be. My low notes are probably better than they were then. My high notes are not what they used to be. It's been quite the change. Of course, the Mozart Requiem's the one that's brought up in the movie Amadeus. That's the one where Salieri is helping out and writing down the music as Mozart tells him what to write. And I once talked to a professor of music while I was at Princeton, because the movie had just come out recently, and he talked about how that was so unrealistic. And I was like, yeah, I know, but boy, was that a fun scene. I did put in a YouTube video into the newsletter that went through that Confit Maledictis part of the movie and having him dictate to Salieri and everything, and it interwove inside the score being annotated as they went along, and it's really great. I do recommend that. Now, again, I do acknowledge the movie Amadeus has about as much connection to the real-life Mozart as, say, Disney's Hercules has to the myth and legend of Hercules, or the Will Smith movie I, Robot has any connection at all to anything written by Isaac Asimov ever, which is a Hollywood thing. But I really love the movie anyway, and if you just enjoy it for the character studies and don't try to take it too seriously as history, then you really get a kick out of it. I love that scene where Mozart asks, how confitates maledictes, how would you translate that? And F. Murray Abraham's like, consigned to flames of woe. Do you believe it? A burning fire that never ends for all eternity. And of course, Salieri's been sabotaging Mozart the whole time, who he believes is the beloved of God, and he's going directly against God's work out of his intense jealousy and just horror that he can't reach the heights that Mozart gets. And oh yes, he knows he's going to pay for it. It's like, wow, this is powerful. At any rate, it's really good stuff. I do recommend that video and, of course, the movie itself. Now, what brought all this up is last Friday night, my wife and I got to attend a performance by the Hartford Chorale, a group in our area, where in the honor of the 100th anniversary of Fauré's passing, they performed a concert called J'adore Fauré, if I'm anywhere near pronouncing that correctly, and they did the Fauré Requiem. Now, they did a lot of other pieces too, most of which are very good, but I really liked the Requiem, and they had a real baritone, and the baritone was superb, so I really had a good time. There's an old gag, how many tenors does it take to change a light bulb? And it's 3, 1 to do it, and 2 to say how they could have done it better. Of course, there's also how many sopranos to change a light bulb? Just 1. She holds onto the bulb and the world revolves around her. A great one there. Or how many mezzos does it take? And none, they can't reach that high. I've never heard a bass version. If you know a bass version of that joke, please let me know. I put a link to a performance of Fauré Requiem that I found online. So if you want to hear a good Fauré Requiem, that's one there. Okay, let's move on to the tweets and toots. This was a wonderful story about Bill Walton. This was by Mike Breen, the very well-known announcer for NBA games, who was a friend of Bill Walton's rather, and he brought his father, who had Parkinson's disease, to go visit. I forget which naval ship it was, but it was a ship that he served on in World War II or Korea, something like that, and wanted to revisit that while he still could. And it was in San Diego, and Walton found out about it or heard him and hosted him and took him on a tour and did all these really nice things for him. It's a wonderful story. So I do recommend, if you get a chance to listen to that, it's really uplifting. This AI analogy, man, I have to use that at some time. The person here was saying, John Niemeister, the result of game studios turning to AI is losing their most talented developers, who will either move to competitors or start their own studios and produce games 10 times better than an AI-driven studio ever could. And here's the key phrase: firing your chefs because microwave dinners are cheaper? No. No. And that's perfect, because that's what AI does. It's a fry cook. It's somebody who knows what everybody else has done and can do the basic stuff, but you don't get rid of your experts because you can get away with the basics. You don't fire all of your Michelin-level chefs because, hey, microwave dinners are cheaper. We'll see how that works. I'm definitely going to use that somewhere. This one, on the other hand, said from ARF Measures that we're going to replace you with a robot, me. Oh, LOL. Good luck getting a robot to match my performance. Boss, it's broken and does nothing. Oh, no. Yeah. This was a great tweet I saw. It said, the entire plot of The Wizard of Oz is a woman having to fix every broken man she runs across before she's allowed to resolve her own plot line. Oh, my goodness, that's right. Scarecrow, and then Tin Man, and then Cowardly Lion, and even the Wizard. She's got to fix them all before she gets to resolve her problem. Although I don't think Glenda is completely blameless in this. The two women in there both caused her all kinds of problems. The Wicked Witch of the East, yeah, we get that. But Glenda could have short-circuited this entire process if she'd wanted to. But no, she let them suffer. Okay, I don't know. Okay, moving on. Since I have all these musical entries this week, I included this one. It looks like a CAPTCHA that says, select all images where, if you were to add a decrescendo, it would add to the musicality of the piece without being interpreted as an overly heavy-handed metaphor within the context of the thematic material. Yeah, okay. I have no idea what those pieces are. I wouldn't know any of that, so I guess I'm a robot. Something about Pride Month. I saw this go around. May you never know the fear of having your human rights challenged every time there's an election. And may you never know the pain of watching loved ones vote against your right to exist fully, equally, and authentically. Yeah, I can't even imagine how awful that would be. And yet it happens all the time right now. We're supposed to be past all this. These are battles we were supposed to have won. I blame my generation for that one. My generation's job was to take care of that one, and we didn't. And I'm disappointed. Unrelated, total gag here. There once was a man from Cork who got limericks and haiku confused. Yes, indeed. There once was a man, 5 syllables, from Cork who got limericks confused. Yeah, so in other words, there's 7 syllables and haiku confused is 5. So perfect. It's a haiku about writing limericks. Very good. This explains so much. Obviously, Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother is sitting there saying, oh, honey, I didn't mean to scare you. I'm a furry. That would do it. Very good. And finally, this one, which is just cracks me up. That's the priest and the others around the deviled egg. The power of Christ compels you. Yeah, there's an exorcism going on the deviled egg. I think that's phenomenal. Anyway, last week I did my deep dive into Spring, and that triggered some of this stuff, the JUnit stuff. And this week I have a course on the latest features in Java, which is always fun. And I hope you enjoyed that. Look for a JUnit video later, and I will see you all next week. Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.